And we're live, episode 62, DATAona. That's right. How to rev up your data and get her going with Darren Young from University Mechanical. That's right. It's been a little while since I've been at the wheel, and I am excited to grab a hold and crash this data car into whatever I can, because we know we have one of our favorite, most active friends in the industry there with us today, Darren Young. We'll get to Darren in just a second. Trent lining back. Man, all I can think about is those drums in the background right now, man. I want you to get on and start going Wayne's World on us.
Oh, it's
What's
too early
happening?
to lay down the thunder. We can't go right to that.
But we can't
Um,
go right to the Thunder. What
uh,
you got going on today, buddy? Where you at? What you doing?
well, I'm at home base, and what I'm doing is getting ready to talk to Darren Young about data. But I'm being good tonight. I just have a Coca-Cola Zero Sugar here is my drink of choice. So, um, John, you got anything more exciting than that you're drinking? Or?
Actually, today's been a long day already, so I felt like Lefroy was the right choice, man. So I got Lefroy 10. It's a stinky Isla Scotch, and
Sounds
it will
Scotch.
literally, dude. It's the best one if you have kids because they'll walk up and the kids are always interested. I'm like, go ahead and smell that. They're like, dude, what died in there? And I'm like, no, 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 that's Scotch. Oh,
That's peat. It grows as a mossy thing, but for some reason Jonathan likes his stuff to go
oh
through
my
it and
gosh.
then taste like it.
Hmm.
I still don't understand this. It really doesn't compute, Jonathan.
There's definitely some sort of weird tapeworm that gets into your blood supply that says you can now drink peated scotches because you don't like it the first time you drink it, but then like a week later you're like, wait a second, I just need to try that one more time, and then another time, and then another time, and it's very 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 addictive.
It's Scottish nanobots. That's what I'm
The
going to say.
Scottish,
Got to
yeah,
be it.
definitely the birthplace of nanobots would be the Isles of Scotland.
All right, Darren. Well, you didn't know you were coming into this crazy mess this afternoon. How you doing, man?
Doing all right. I got a empty coffee cup. Only been
Empty.
at the office 10 hours. I got another couple to go, so I can't drink anything too hard yet.
But Darren, is it half full or half empty?
It's completely empty. I'm looking hard. Looking hard to fill that up.
We can get to that story later.
Yeah, we can get to that story later, but we want to get into data. So we've covered a little bit about you over the time. You've had you've been awesome at giving feedback to the guests we've had on and on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow Darren on LinkedIn, you have to. It's fun. But I kind of want to start with the
That was a nice way of putting it.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, it's compelling.
It's compelling, and if you want someone to interact with you, then Darren is your man.
Oh, if you want to have your inner voice of anger at technology sort of personified, that is Darren. Like everything that goes wrong that you want to scream at technology about, Darren can personify this and bring it to you. So,
Yeah. Darren has probably actually beat a printer with a baseball bat in his life at some point. It's
Thought about it. I'm just not good at sports.
uh,
Oh man, that's awesome. That is awesome. And but not to just throw you as the contrarian or the person that's just on LinkedIn. You've got a lot of experience implementing software, being a realist around software, but also being a bit of a artful user as well. So I think you've probably learned a lot about data in the beginning and from there. So I kind of want to just get an idea of where your head is currently, because data seems to be on everybody's mind, but there doesn't seem to be any cohesion in the thoughts of it. So I just want to get, sort of a list of things right now that are top of mind for you, and then start kind of running through them.
I learned long ago that people suck at data, myself included. That was back in my manufacturing days, where the first file name of every piece on every job was A1. So if you looked across your whole portfolio, you had 2,000 files called A1. God forbid somebody drug and dropped that into the wrong folder somewhere. So people just aren't good with data. And again, myself included. I think I've better than some ways worse than others. So that's just kind of the overarching rule. People are bad at data. And when you don't have a lot of good processes, or your processes are shortcutted due to tight schedule, you don't even have time to think about data. So unless you've got a good system to help you manage it just organically, it does take intentional thought. But the thing I guess I've noticed in the last couple of years where my head's been more in like supply chain management, just internal logistics. People have their own vernacular about data. They know what the terms mean in their own head. You start talking integration, which is another buzzword our industry hears a lot. You have to have a different conversation, and you really have to slow people down, and they need to start, if you ask somebody what a particular term is, they have their definition, they think it's a silly discussion. But when you start bridging silos, those terms mean different things to different people. And, there's several examples of that I can think of. Shipping is one of them. Is that a status? Is it a location? Is it a process? Well, it's kind of all three of those things, but they're also kind of different, nuanced. So, those are the things I guess I tend to struggle with. And then I see people don't want to put time into data or think about it, so they just do stuff. Or, well, let's just do this quick. And undoubtedly that leads to bad data. When I look at a system and, we're not putting in a shipping date. You find out, there's reasons for that. Some of them are legitimate. Some are just, we didn't get around to it. But anytime I see where we're having bad data, it tells me we probably have poor tech, or we didn't define the process well, or, there's something behind that causes that to happen. It's not that just people aren't doing their job. They are doing their job. Quite often they're using the tools we gave them. We just didn't implement them properly or configure them properly. So I tend to be pretty slow on blaming the user in a lot of cases. I tend to take that burden on myself, right or wrong. It's up to me to game the user and figure out how to get it so that I can get data from an accurate, consistent way.
Yeah, but you notice that like this is not just a data problem. Like I used to judge it by filing cabinets that people never go into. Like there is a level at which I would walk into. When I went into the first company I worked with, which was a surveying company, you had tons of filing cabinets that no one was ever going to open. And it's like if you could have shown them the amount of information that was in those filing cabinets, that business would have been scalable in an entirely different way. And so they had all of the knowledge sitting there, but it was in this format in which you couldn't get at it. And I think that's originally why I reached out to you, Darren, is I was reading an article on dark data. And in my mind, that equated to what I was seeing like analog style in those filing cabinets. So just real quick, because you kind of have a better way of explaining things than I do. Could you explain to us what you think or what dark data is, just so that everybody has an idea? Because that term just started to bounce around, especially on LinkedIn, and I saw 2 thought discussions on it. But what do you identify as sort of dark data?
I probably won't get the definitions right of the people who are using those terms, but in my mind, a lot of it's unnecessary duplicate data, or data that should be structured and it's not structured, or it's just data we're collecting for the sake. It's a proverbial junk drawer. Well, I don't know what to do with this, so I'm just going to throw it in there. And I don't know, you're kind of a tinkerer, Jonathan. My guess is in your garage or your shop somewhere you've got a big bucket of nuts and bolts and screws, and it's not organized. It's not in a nice 5S label drawer system. It just goes in there. And I've got the same thing in my garage. How often do I go in there and pull something out? Once in a while, but I'm pulling one thing out of 10,000 screws or nuts or bolts. I'd probably be better off just throwing it all out and buying what I need when I need it. Dark data is kind of the same way. It's there, but even if you find it, can you rely on it? Do you know you've got the latest version? So it's just unmanaged, unnecessary duplicates. To me, it's just kind of, I don't know. It's just it's things we kind of collect along the way of doing work that nobody really put any time into and thought about. Do we need to manage it? Should we jettison it at a certain point? Does it need to be controlled, or is it literally just temporary working data? Kind of in my mind, it encompasses kind of all that stuff. It's just, it doesn't have the light shined on it, but I mean, there's a, it's like driving a vehicle with a trailer. You're pulling a lot of weight, and there's a lot of wind resistance anyway, keeping you from going faster, whether you want it there or not.
I would say that we just had a giant dumpster delivered, Darren, and I threw out a lot of those boxes of miscellaneous detritus that were in my garage. And
killed you inside, didn't it?
It killed me the first project I did afterwards, because you can't go back and look for the miscellaneous part that you have it. You're positive it was there, and you can't get to it. And I think that's a similar fear with I still have hard drives. In fact, I might even have tape drives of backups of computers that I probably don't own anymore. But I'm afraid to throw them out without looking through them. But all of it's unstructured, so there's no way I'm going to go back there and be able to find what I'm looking for. How, you've seen a bunch of different companies, and you've also sort of been involved with the MCA and a bunch of other like collaborative groups. How much of the data problem that we're seeing right now, where people just really aren't structuring things well, is because they just seem overwhelmed by the amount of stuff they've built up in their data garage, but are afraid to throw things out, but are also not willing to look back at that and say, I'm gonna get that organized. Because I did organize some of it. Like, I went through the boxes and I grabbed stuff that I thought I'd use next. I got it wrong, but like, I did organize that stuff. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of it's a communication problem. Somebody had commented on LinkedIn once, there's me coming out negative again. They talked about digital communications. Like, we don't digitally communicate. Okay, so maybe this is it, but email is not digital communication. All the SharePoint notices and alerts and task lists, that's not communication, that's messaging. So for anyone who's in a relationship with the partner, imagine going home and you don't ever talk to each other. You just leave each other Post-it notes. That's all you do. That's not communication. That's messaging. That's different. And so, there's so much information. We don't want everyone to miss anything. So we just scattershot everybody in a ton of emails. And so you never have time to go through it. How many people get hundreds of emails a day? You miss it. And because we haven't taken the time to put systems in place to actually do data management or document management, well, I'll email you that spreadsheet instead of sending you to a link on SharePoint. There's just a variety of things. I mean, even when you look at what we do with the new tools, why does BIM 360, Autodesk Construction Cloud Docs platform not work? Why does SharePoint not work? Why? Because we use it like a file server.
Mm-hmm.
We're not using it, leveraging, nobody's meta tagging the data that's just on SharePoint. So even though theoretically I could do a search and find exactly what I'm looking for, we can't do that. I just saw somebody recently, they were uploading PDFs from a file server, and there's, version A, version B, version C, and they're putting them on BIM 360. Well, if you upload using the same name, sorry, my phone's going off here. If you upload them using the same name, BIM 360, you can actually overlay them and see what's different between them. But instead, now I got files side by side, and I've got twice as much data to manage because I didn't let BIM 360 manage the versioning for me, which then begs the question, why are they on the file server in the first place? But that's just what people have done. I'm rambling off on things. I could probably go off forever. So if there's anything I touched on that you want to drill into, let me know. But
well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell everybody how big the problem was before we talk about how to fix it. Because I remember I introduced document management at a place that I worked, which is as simple as saying, I just want you to check out and check in the files you use. I mean, that was as simple as it was. And that way I would get revisions and everything else. And I had exactly like you, I had them being like, okay, we took out, this document and then we saved it back as revision 1. And I was like, no, hold on. You don't have to do that because I am doing all of that work for you. And in fact, that messes it up if you do it. And it was multiple classes for multiple weeks before I could get everybody to simply check out a file, change the file, and check it back in. without changing the name, without changing, the number. So like even something that's that simple, that's just opening a file and closing a file, it is difficult to communicate to everyone why that needs done. And so I don't know, in my mind, it's like there's a huge number of problems with the way in which we are stewarding our data. I think I even stole the data stewardship name from you. In fact, I'm sure I stole it from you.
I probably stole it from someone else.
Well, it's good because you're going to get credit for it. So we'll like make it your thing. But like with that, like, what do you see? Because I know I look at the AIs and I'm looking for a savior, man. I'm looking for something like, I looked at DATAona and I'm like, are you going to be my savior, or am I going to be able to push all my data into you and you will structure it for me? But what are your thoughts on that? Like in people like me, then, and I'll admit it's not a good idea, but I mean, I am in some ways waiting for that day. And with Chat GTP says, when I can say, hey, could you go through and structure all my data? Which is a question that I couldn't even tell it how to do that. It would just be kind of a random question. But what do you see?
Somebody has to figure it out first before the AI can learn how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. What do you see as possible saviors for this, for sort of the state we're in?
Besides death?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
I
positive saviors.
was at a conference years ago. I think Autodesk ended up buying them, and I don't know. I think they wanted the underlying tech. I don't know what happened to it, but the founder, prior to that acquisition, he had a platform that he's like, look, you can try to structure the data all you want, but there's only so far you're going to get. And so he built a system to help Matt just live with the unstructured data. And that's what Google does, right? They didn't structure the world. They just built algorithms and search engines and tried to build logic around that unstructured data. So that's probably the way it's going to end up being. Now, there's some things that probably should have more structure. RFIs, submittals, there's contractual documents. Those things should have more structure and rigor around them. But there's just a lot of data that we generate just in the course of doing our job that it's not. What's the term I've heard? The juice isn't worth the squeeze to try to structure it. Yeah. But yet you need it. So, I mean, I don't know. Is it worth it to organize all those odds and ends of nuts and bolts in that big, jar you have? No. But there's other things that do make sense to, my guess is there's somewhere in your garage, you've got a label, somewhere on the shelf or on a container of what's in it. So I think it's just managing, living in kind of both those worlds. I think, until we get to that point, I think one of the problems is people's minds just subconsciously shift when you put them on a computer. And the best way I can think to describe it is, my kids are homeschooled, and my younger son, when he was going through math, struggled with math anxiety. You give him the same exact problem on a computer, no problem. In his mind, he'd conjured this up, the computer will help me. And I see that happen with data and processes. We'll just buy this program and it'll just work now. That'll be, the computer will fix it. And it's like, no. I had somebody once talk about how great Procore was because all the sheets are linked to get hyperlinked together. It's like, you realize somebody did that, right? That wasn't just magic. Somebody actually had to link some of that, but their perception was, so it's a great program. Ours is horrible. You could just dump crap in there and it's going to come out perfect, and it's like, no, that's not, they just managed whoever was managing that site ran that, their data better. So I don't know, the AI, I think a lot of people talk about the AI stuff, like the Chat GTP is giving you answers. I don't see that being its strength. I see that as, I've used it more for actually doing work, generate a sample data set, things I would typically do in Excel. Instead, okay, here's a list of stuff and manipulate the data this way, prefix this, delimit it by that, spit it back out. Another way I use it that I think will probably help with the data is, I spent 6 months trying to, on and off, as I kept running into it, solve a problem in Power Query. The data structures were different, inconsistent within the same column. I just couldn't figure it out. All my search terms are very misleading. They're going to bring me to very obvious results, but they're not what I'm looking for. So I just typed into Chat GTP, like I'm talking to you, what I was trying to do. and what I was encountering. And here's step 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And, I don't have that option. Oh, I'm sorry. Try this. Still didn't give me the right answer, but it got me up on a hill where I could see where I needed to go. Mm-hmm. I mean, it got me to that higher ground. So even though it didn't get me there, and I see it having the potential to do that type of thing with data. You know what? Just maybe it can't get you if it's too unstructured exactly, but if it can limit your field of vision or get you up into some higher ground so you can see what you're looking for, oh, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. There's I think a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I think it really because what it analyzes, like basically what's out there, what it can pull into its grasp to go through and come up with this stuff. It's not always going to have the answer, like you said, but it knows. I mean, it knows the typical, like steps between, like what happens between those steps. And I agree with you. I think that it is going to be a really good troubleshooting tool for people, but I still think you're going to have the person come to the realization of what the answer really is. But, could I go to something like a broken furnace? I'm not going to be able to go to Chat GPT and say, hey, my furnace is broken. How do I fix it? Like people think that eventually it's going to be able to tell you that. Well, no, but as you're driving into some of it's going to lay you down that typical troubleshooting 101 path, like
you're going to narrow your field of vision where you need to search. I don't know, your former military, don't they have they've got a whole methodology how they're doing search and rescue and, on how they do things like that.
Yeah. I mean, you never, it's like, this is kind of, Darren, I believe you to be an out of the box thinker, but the box exists for a reason, right? 99.999% of the permutations are in the box, right? Yeah. So it's kind of, that's the whole methodology behind what Darren just described. That's why there's a process to it. It's like, well, maybe it's this, and it's like, well, maybe, but chances are it's in the box. I mean,
I think inside the box every time. My box is just in a different spot than yours.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't blaming you, but I think people do. There are people who jump to that outlier, or that well, it must be this. It's like, well,
every expert has been shown up by somebody who really knows very little, because the expert immediately goes to the hard, oh, this must be complicated. What was the story I heard? I don't even know if it was true, but I heard as a kid once a story about a semi truck went under an overpass and got wedged underneath because it was, too tall. And they had all the engineers and the fire department, everyone figuring out how to cut this thing away and get it out of there. And some little kid on a bike, why don't you just let the air out of the tires? You know what I mean? Simple little things like that. Yeah. So again, I think that's one of those things I think those AI systems will be able to do is, I think I know the 5 different things I need to look at. It's going to tell me the 6th one that I forgot about.
Dude, that we were just talking about that, John. I think it was from the book Range. They talked about the specialist that's digging in the trench, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get so entrenched in your specialty that the guy that's just able to stand up and kind of do, he finds the answer. I mean, it's
dude, I have an assistant, Eli, who in software development is constantly bringing me
you named your AI Eli?
Yes, my AI is named Eli, and he's physical. He's like a cyborg. He's a nice guy too, for a cyborg. But he constantly compared to most cyborgs, which are kind of.
We're not talking to you, Chat GPT. Don't get mad at us. You can get mad at Jonathan.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, we're friends.
Don't get mad at me. I paid my extra to talk to you special. But he comes up with he'll ask me a question and then I'll overthink it immediately. And I think I told him today, I'm like, when you ask me a question, my immediate answer is going to be overly complicated. Give me 30 minutes to think about it, and then let me answer it again, because most of the time it is let the air out of your tires. And I feel really convicted about that, because like you guys said with the box thing, literally I have a group of VDC rules that was on the wall. And the last rule was think outside of the box all you want, but look in the box first. That's why there's a damn box. Right. It's like, there is that idea that we jump to things on the GTP thing. GPT thing. I got to tell you, I asked it because somebody gave me a really complex definition of what data was. I said to it, what's a really simple, explanation of or explanation of what data is? And it goes, information that can be read by a computer. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I needed to hear. Because I think that at some level, people are like, well, data is just information, and it's not. It's information that can be read by a computer. But when you put it that simply, all of these people who are afraid of it become less afraid. Like that calms them down a little bit. And I think there is a level at which, especially when it comes to data, people are sort of overwhelmed by the experts and their explanation of it. So, I was talking to Amanda at Electri because she's doing a data symposium, and she said one of the really hard things she's having is showing people the value of their data. So, Darren, what do you think? And I know you kind of go out there and actually do leverage data for these companies and really show them the value. Like, what are some of the things that might pop to mind that would be easy for some of these people that are sort of afraid of data, to get them to understand data better, and also maybe give some value to the data that they're casting away?
And I think the first thing anybody could do is just do a kind of a strategic dump of the different data they want to look at. Just understand the diversity, the quality. You really can't do anything with it unless, if it's bad data, it's not going to be helpful. So you need to understand kind of where you're at. But I think it was a podcast I heard Amanda on. She was talking about how people, they want to go right down the, I want this. It's like, we run into the same thing. Okay, so we estimate jobs, and they take off a job a certain way based on the way the customer wants to bid it. Then we build it a different way based on how we need to build it and a schedule. And how do we track progress against what we said? Did we say what we did? Did we do what we say? And those things don't necessarily fit. And it's like, well, we could just look at the job and, how many feet of carbon steel pipe were estimated on the whole job and how many were done at the end of the job. Very high level, one number. Is it what I want? No, but it's better than not having anything. And then, okay, so what's the next level? I've heard the same thing about status tracking. Technically, status tracking is very easy to implement. The hard part is, what do you want to track and when? Right. Are you gonna scan something every time you turn around? What if it doesn't get scanned reliably? Like I said, I think people try to. They want to start out with answers. Mm-hmm. And so they go, and again, this is one of the great cultures, I think, of construction is we're doers, we're problem solvers, we just jump in. Right. That's a little bit harder to do with data. You need to sometimes step back a little bit. We immediately try to solutionize. Well, let me just grab all of that and I'll get this answer. It's like, no, let's, so I think it's a little bit of a mindset shift in particular for our industry. What makes us really good, I think probably makes us a little bit less good on data.
Did you say solutionize? Because that's going to be my new favorite word. Because I haven't actually heard solutionize before.
Every company I've ever been at, how you have a meeting and you start talking about what you're going to, and so, well, we could just do this. We could highlight this red there and put immediately to the answers.
Yeah.
With no problem statement or definition at all.
I've worked with customers. The tracking status thing, Darren, that's 100%. I've had a client that's like, well, we're not tracking any of it now. And I'm like, okay, well, let's track work, and then you're kind of working with them. It's like, what's a list of, statuses that we think we want to track? And they come back with you with 30 statuses. And you're like, okay, look, you're doing none of this. Why don't we start with hey, it's been ordered, or it's been built, it's been shipped. Why don't we start somewhere? Not, they come right in with this complete grand. And I think that's why we get paralyzed. I think the industry has, there's a lot of shiny things out there. And I think they look at what they want it to be and what it's going to take to get to this grand, this grand ending. And it's like, so they just, it's like a paralysis.
So maybe it was like me, maybe everyone's not like this. As a kid, my room was messy. I'm sure other people were just
No.
really neat as a kid. And when it was time to clean your room, I would be in there all freaking day because it looked so overwhelming. And it took me a while to realize, okay, you know what? Let's just pick up the socks. It's all I've got to worry about. Do that. Okay, now let's pick up the stuffed animals. Okay, now let's pick up the toy trucks. And you just got to, data's kind of that same way. You just got to kind of start somewhere. And again, I think people undervalue how important sometimes just exposing things. Company I worked for in the past, they had one of their business units always had poor financial performance in January. It was their special projects group because they're smaller projects, they quick turn and burn.
Yeah.
And so they were putting together a dashboard where all the project executives and salespeople were tracking their pipeline. Hey, there's this project we expected to hit in 3 years. We think there's a 15% margin and it's worth this amount. We think our chances of winning it are this. And so everyone would do that. And so they just built a dashboard of everyone tracking their pipeline. Just doing that one special projects business units, their performance got better in January. And because it became obvious that come in December, they were busy focusing on end of year, making their numbers, and they weren't paying attention to January. With nobody browbeating them, nobody telling them, hey, you got to be better. They just built a dashboard that reported what they were already collecting anyway. So it was up there for everyone to see. And they self-corrected all on their own. There's still holes in the data.
But I think it goes back to you asked the question, why are we performing poorly in January? Right.
Yeah.
It really all starts with, and any company should start with, what's the question? What decisions, what things are we doing that we don't have data to support? And start there. When you're cleaning your room, do you start with making your bed because that's what's visible? There's certain fundamental things.
I don't even think they were looking to answer that question, Jeff, up front. They were just, let's put it out there because we know we should be better about this. And that's one of those cases where even without having a problem that they're trying to solve or a question they would like to get an answer to, just shedding light on the data itself. Here's what it is. Improved the consistency because people saw the holes, which reminds me of I've got all kinds of stories. I took a political science class once, and the professor was on a side job, he was a lean consultant. And so what he did, and you started out in your political science class, and he's showing videos of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares. It's like, well, that's a weird thing. And so he's starting to explain lean and what Gordon Ramsay's not talking about lean, but he's doing all the lean things, observe, identify bottlenecks. And then so he says, okay, the point of all this is I want you to track your study habits for your class. Just, when you study, how long you study, how many pages you went through, just do that. And if you do that, by the end of the class, I'll give you a yellow belt certification in lean. And this is how that'll help you in your career, no matter what it is. Anyway, he said when he did that, he actually saw his, I forgot what the number was. It was like north of 25% improvement in student scores just by the act of tracking it. Yeah. With no objective to do anything different. But again, because people looked at the data, they were paying attention to it, their behavior changed organically all on its own. And to me, that's the power of the data. It's not, should we go buy this other company or not, or chase this job or not? Those are all good things down the road when we get all of our other ducks in a row. But just, let's intelligently harvest things that make sense. Look, make sure people see it. And the data will tell you where to look, in my mind.
So what do you think? So in saying that, obviously all they did was start looking at it and the end result improved, right? So in order, I guess mathematics would tell you that in order for the result to be different, something between A and C, B had to change. And I'm not saying just look. So what do you think the idea of just studying it, what do you think that did for them to make that end result improve? I mean, they had to have become aware of something, right? And then they had to have shifted something. I mean,
yeah, I think it's just, shifting that awareness from subconscious. I mean, you could have 10 jobs go right and the one that goes bad, or, you install 100 valves and you're going to switch a whole vendor because one goes bad. You know, that negative experience sticks out in your head. So you don't realize how often it has, you know, we're just bad at estimating. There's so much emotion and, you know, just, I think, subconscious decision making that happens in our head.
I think that's it.
You know, so that, again, I don't think people are even, in some cases, aren't even intentionally trying to change anything. It's just because it's there, you know.
I think you nailed it. I think it's more decisions stopped being made subconsciously and started being made consciously. I think that's literally, you know, so there were different decisions being made, but I think that, I mean, and I could be wrong there, but to me, that's probably one of the biggest things that it just, there was now a practice and a method behind more decisions. You know,
it turns off autopilot briefly when you need to go through the turbulence or a little rougher terrain.
Yeah, I think it actually piggybacks on that whole thing that Nathan says is show me how I'm measured and I'll show you how I react. It's not that. It literally, if you show me how,
that doesn't work with me.
It doesn't work with me either, but there is a level, Darren, there's a level at which when we're shown what we're doing and where those potholes are, we will naturally, regardless of intentionality, avoid them because once you know it's a problem, you can go and avoid it. By the way, I gotta say though, that picking up one thing or doing one thing at a time, I don't know if you guys ever watched Kung Fu when you were a kid with Kane, you know, and the whole Taoist thing, but like 80% of the episodes in Kung Fu, he's giving that same thing. It's like, you're never going to clean up the park until you pick up one cigarette butt. You're never going to fix your data until you start with that one piece. Yep. And you know, I think one of the things, and I took some of your examples and actually jotted them down, but I think one of the things is, can they pick that right piece that inspires them to pick up the next one? Because that's the thing, is when somebody decides they're going to structure their data and that first thing they do doesn't pay off, it's heartbreaking, because now they've tried and they failed. So like I work with a lot of different people and I really struggle to figure out like what's going to be the win that's going to inspire you to pick up that next piece of data. Like go for it.
Well, I wanted to bring this up before and be kind of the data historian, so to speak. I can't believe I'm putting myself in that position. But Jonathan, you were talking about people revving files and putting them up. Why do people rev files and do that? Because they opened up Word in the beginning or whatever they were using and overwrote what was there, saved it, or accidentally hit a button that erased stuff and saved it, and now they are permanently,
now they have post-traumatic stress.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. And why do we not look at, you know, certain of us look at data the same way? Like, how did we have to write databases in Access back in the day, and so that you could write calls to it, and it had to be this particular way, and if you screwed that up, it didn't take you anywhere. So there's like this trepidation in this history that you're overcoming with certain generations. Like, you know, naming, Darren, I think you said this earlier on with like every file being A1. Well, that was because when I went in, I couldn't find that file every freaking time, and I spent an hour. Well, no, was the answer what we did? Not really, right? There's probably a better way to answer that, but there's the hit that you're carrying around this.
Well, you just put the number first next time, and then you.
Yeah, right. Well, you've got this historical like baggage that people are carrying around that you're also having to bust through. So it to me, it's kind of funny to see the progression of where we are today. And you know, I struggle in the Google world, right? Google just wants me to name things and then ask it. And I'm like, no, it's got to be in a folder that's in a subfolder that goes here. And I'm like, but that's how my brain works. Why does my brain work that way? Because I was born and bred in the Microsoft world of folder structure, right? That's just how I'm not built for other ways.
Yeah.
So,
well, in a lot of cases, there's not systems to manage other ways yet. I mean, when I used to implement data management systems, that's the first thing people would do, Jeff. They would recreate their folder structure, which was really a mimic of a file cabinet and drawers and folders.
Yep.
You know, It's
Oh no, I had a company I worked with that the first thing you did when you took a job off and you won it was you took a sample folder structure, right? You copied it and you pasted it into the new one and you appended the job
Jeff.
number at the end of it.
Jeff, I got news for you. There's still a lot of companies that do
Yes. 90% of all companies.
That's not that rare.
Yeah. The vast
Do you
majority.
know what blew that up though? It was funny to watch for a while because this will tell you when it all went down. Is when OneDrive first came out, it was still based on SharePoint's original architecture. So the number sign torched it.
Yep.
So you
mean the hashtag?
The hash, yeah, the hashtag, yeah, the hash. That meant number, and there we go. I just aged myself.
You aged yourself pretty good, Darren.
It made number in that, and it was like you put that into OneDrive, and then it all blew up. So yeah.
You know what's scary though is Brad Hendricks. I started working with him on some stuff, and we were talking about the hack tools that we use every day, and he brought up this one called Everything, and it's a free tool, little exe, and what it does is it's the fastest way to search for anything on your computer. It caches it so that those searches are instantaneous. And he's like, "Is this great?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm definitely have it, but thank God I didn't have that when I was younger." Because if I could have thrown any file anywhere on my computer and just been able to find it instantly, I wouldn't have attempted to order anything ever. And I think the people that are coming in to construction and to anything else where you have data are offered these tools that say you don't have to be structured, you don't have to be disciplined about data because we'll do that for you. But the tools are still in their infancy. So by the way, everything's awesome. So you should go download it, but don't give it to young people because you want them to be structured about their data or their naming systems and where they save things. But I really see that as there's a big tension between making things easier and ensuring that people are still going to be good stewards of their data. I don't know where that tension breaks down, but I will honestly say if you gave me a tool that would allow me to save files anywhere on my computer and just call them up, they would all be on my desktop.
You'll see that, especially I think with project managers, project engineers. You want to know the ones that understand document data management well? It's the guys that learned through some old project manager and their first job was putting paper in and out of a ring binder. Here's your RFI log, pull the old one out, put the new one in. Those are the guys that understand it really well. Now those guys don't understand the tech, and then we implement the tech poorly because we're wired for something else. And then the you people who are used to tech use our poorly implemented tech to try to do that task. It's just, it's just
oh yeah, man,
kind of a friction point.
Well, project managers tend to be all prescriptive about the way that they talk about things. They're like, go here, do this, do that. And I was talking to this person and I said, yeah, I've always had trouble connecting with the field, but this guy, Ben, I knew always did it well. First words out of her mouth were, John, you use too many damn words. You need to say, go do this, go do that, be prescriptive. And I think that's why whenever you're implementing, man, you should have that other person that is that project manager that's really prescriptive right beside you to tell us who our brains are wired different, why this isn't going to work for their field. It is crazy, man.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to lose Jeff here, and I'd imagine we're probably going to start winding down ourselves. We could probably have a few more minutes, but Darren, you brought a pretty cool analogy in my mind earlier. I guess I'll kind of circle back to when you talked about the fact that when they just started studying it or looking at it, how it impacted I'm reminded of younger before everyone had a camera in their hand at all times. And I'm not going to talk about myself because, of course, when I was younger, I never threw a fit, so it had to have been a cousin or a brother or someone, right? Because most of us were perfect children. But you're reminded of when, you're throwing a fit in front of a parent or an uncle or something. And the old saying of, you wouldn't do this if you could see yourself right now, right? You ever hear it though? I have to wonder if that rang true. Like if they videotaped you throwing that tantrum and then showed it to you, would you have done it again after that? It's I think that's the analogy.
I even like looking at my old code, but I gotta keep it. So
yeah, well, I think that's the analogy there. It's like just look at what you do, and you know that if it was dumb, you won't do it again.
You know, where I came to the conclusion that users are bad with data was me asking a user which one of these is the most current version, because there was a final, an as built, a revised as built, a final.
Right, yeah.
Which one is well, it's this one. And it's like, no, if you open them up, you look at the date, it's different inside, and it's you've got to be again. You can't duplicate paper without copying it. It's extra work. You got to distribute. There's a lot of work behind that. It is so easy to duplicate and disperse the electronic data that it's intangible to people.
That's a good point too.
It needs a little bit more due diligence, because the paper's on my desk or it's on yours.
Right.
But if it's electronic, I still have a copy. You have a copy. Now, I mean, I see, here's the approved material matrix. Somebody emails you, and what's the file name? Copy of.
Yeah.
I wish we could do the time study, but I honestly think that Fearless is more efficient. So Fearless in my mind is you never would rename revision 1, revision 2, because you know that you're only ever going to have to go back in time every once in a while. And you probably go back in time 1 out of every 300 documents. So if you're making all of this extra work for yourself, and I feel like this is the sort of pothole of people that are trying to short circuit data, keeping track of itself, is they're always trying to be able to look back. They're always worried about what they're going to lose. Like you said, when I threw out all those nuts and bolts, I've already not cried, but I mean, I came close. I came actually close to crying, because I knew I threw out like a motor that I knew I needed. And I'm like, damn it, if I could just get that back. And I think that, like you said, it causes that post-traumatic stress of, we take all these extra steps. I would wonder if we did the time study, if we find out that being fearless and not doing the backups, back up the computer, but not like making the second file, even without data management, would save you money, because you're only redoing it when you mess it up, like really, really bad.
Yeah. And there's a cost to keeping all that stuff around, and then
I
don't know, 50 or 100 years from now, Discovery Channel will have a hoarders show, and it won't be about physical things. It'll be about files and data.
God, that would be so awesome.
That's
we really
terrifying.
need to have one of those hoarder people come on and explain to the industry, here's how you get rid of your version anxiety and your history anxiety and your.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I know both of you are old enough to be around for paper drawings. Have you gone into you have to keep a copy of your as-builts for, what was it, 4 years? There's something like contract documents for 7 and as-builts for 4 was a thing in Pennsylvania. And so I go into this room full of paper, and I'd be like, you're taking up all this space that could be my VDC department with all this paper. But also it's like, you would never be able to find anything in here. This is all completely useless.
So I worked for when I worked for Granite Fabricator. They're over 100 years old. They had old vellum drawings rolled up the size of a pencil in an old cement shack from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And when they were consolidating their campus, that shack won't be there, and we're not moving this stuff. So myself and another lady that was there, we became we flattened them all out and scanned them all in. And they actually did use them once in a while. If I'm going to add on to, a mausoleum that the Catholic diocese did 80 years ago, I need to see how it was built. Or, here's a steel pickling tank, and I need the new granite weir caps over the acid baths. And so we did reference them, but it was easier to find once we organized it, instead of just a building with just a ton of rolls of drawings. It takes a while to flatten out a drawing that's rolled up the size of a pencil.
Oh, and then you have to flip the blueprints color wise. You have to invert the colors, because it's a huge file if it's the other way. I always thought that OCR programs would be the resurrection device of data, because people keep those filing cabinets, And there's some value in going back through all your bids and getting some historic data. And usually the paper forms were far more organized than their data structures. So if you have OCR that can read those in and then bring that back, I'm always like, well, again, looking for that savior that to come in and help us with data. I always thought that would be the thing that really changed us. But we got to wrap up real soon. So I have one last question in regards to the way that data is talked about in the way that's used within our industry. Do you have in your mind like what you hope to see in the next, I'm going to call it like the next iteration or the next paradigm shift within construction in terms of data? Like, what do you want it to actually look like when we make our next major change or major revolution of data?
Paper.
Don't say paper.
No, I saw a post on LinkedIn today. Jim Quancy from Autodesk on the developer network posted somebody wired up like Chat GTP to Autodesk Inventor. Make me a cylinder X long, I mean, and for one, I was impressed because think of all the, the old trades guys who aren't tech savvy, that how long it takes to train them in tech. But if you had a system like that, it already knows your data. It can start organizing it for you. I don't have to worry about saving it somewhere. It just knows what to do based on what you're, hey, I'm doing this. Hey, go put this over there. It's going to take the work, I think, out of managing some of that. So I think those tools have the potential to, as they help you automate and do the heavy lifting of work, I think it's going to extend to the data portion of it as well. It knows what it just did for you. It knows what you asked you. It's going to know where it goes. And it's going to remember what you did. So when you ask for it, it's going to remember that context where you might go back later and not realize, okay, well, there's 5 versions of them. How do I know? It's going to know. So I'm hoping I'll probably be retired before that happens. But, someday.
Grant, do you have a last question for Darren here?
I don't, Dan. I mean, I think Darren and I have had probably
I'm so rare
dozens, if not hundreds of
that he doesn't have any questions because I don't share my opinions.
Yeah. we've had hours and hours and hours of discussions over the years, and I've always valued Darren as a great resource in the industry and a great friend, and I'm glad that he could join us